Hey everyone, thanks for watching. This is a new channel called Beautiful Bean Juice. We'll be doing a lot of different coffee things here. Today we'll be looking at the Orea Type B glass brewer. This is a brewing cone that doesn't sit in a holder like most other brewers, including the normal Orea, but it just sits directly in the carafe. So I have here the V60 size 2 carafe and it fits in there perfectly. This is a new brewer developed by Orea, I think about last year. Personally, I don't like to brew with plastics, so I prefer my brewing vessels to be glass, but at the same time, a lot of them will absorb a lot of heat. I'll be talking about that a bit later in the video as well. So today we'll be looking at this brewer, we'll be brewing some coffee with it, I'll be telling you the pros and cons, who's this for, who's this not for, and closing off with my general recommendation on whether or not you should buy this product. Just to get it out of the way, I bought this product with my own money. There's no sponsorship, nothing in this video is sponsored, it's my first video. Before I brew this, I'd like to just talk about it a little bit more. So today I'll be brewing a very small recipe, 12 grams of coffee to 200 grams of water. It's one of the things I actually love about this brewer is it's able to do quite small recipes, so you can really just brew a cup just for yourself. The largest volume I've brewed with it is about up to 300 grams with water out, so 18 to 300, so that's still not a big cup. Some people would consider that a single person serving. Personally, I mostly brew for just myself, for me and my girlfriend, so it's perfect for that situation. But if you like to brew bigger volumes, I don't think it will be able to handle it. Because of the flow rate, it has quite a bit of versatility. You can brew a lot of different recipes. The recipe I'll be doing today will be a very quick recipe, a single pour recipe where you grind quite fine, you pour relatively quickly. And because of the high flow rate, it won't stall. And it's quite an interesting thing that you can do with this brewer, which you can't do with most other flat bottom brewers, and I'll talk a bit about how does it taste. Okay, so my kettle has just boiled, so I will start by preheating the brewer, just pouring some hot water to it. And because the massive glass isn't that big, it tends to heat up pretty quickly. At the same time, I've noticed that if you're careful while lifting it up, even though it gets hot, you're still able to lift it out. But this is hot to the touch for sure right now. So it heats up very easily. It doesn't retain a lot of, sometimes you need to push the filter down a little bit. Typically it will sit right. Then because it doesn't have a base, you need to make sure that the brewer sits level in the carafe. I'll now add my freshly ground beans, which as you can see are quite fine. This was setting 3 on the ZB6. So I'll just shake it to level the bed. Then I'll start my pour. This is a very simple recipe, which is a circle pour followed by a center pour, and the expected drawdown time should be under 2 minutes. So I'm going to start my timer. Pour up to 50 grams, pouring in circles, make sure to evenly wet all the beans, and because there's no bloom, just followed by a relatively slow center pour. Don't have to rush, the water should be in by 1 minute. Trying to pour close to the bed, not disturb it, just adding the water. So we've hit our weight exactly at the right time. Then we just do a little swirl, to distribute the grounds. I've been a little bit aggressive in my swirling. It's okay. Then we just wait for this to draw down. In the meantime, I grab the cups. I can put the brewer in when it's done drawing down. As you can see, the drawdown is fairly quick. Has a high flow rate, even though the ground was quite fine. It seems like we're going to hit that sweet spot of between 1 minute and 45 seconds and 2 minutes on this brewer, which is great. So there, the brewer is finished. The brewer is hot, but not too hot to lift. I will put it into this glass. Okay, well, I wait for this to cool down. I'll set up the camera back in the other spot, and I will pour myself some coffee. And we'll talk about how does this taste. Okay, so we're back to do the tasting. So this is a nice Kenyan coffee from Paul's Gold, a restaurant in Japan, which I really like. So it's a nice fruity coffee, some tea tones. You get all of that out. You have to say the acidity is quite muted, which has been my experience in general with the Orea, especially with this recipe, is that, you know, it tends to mute acidity and it also reduces complexity a little bit. So because of the flat bottom design, if you compare it to something like a V60, it will brew in a more consistent way, but it also removes some of that complexity in my experience. I just really love this cup. I think it's a delicious cup of coffee. It has a good body. I think typically brewing with the Orea, you get a lot more body than you would get with something like a V60. And also some of the most pronounced flavor notes I've had in any coffees have come usually with the Orea. So it has this way to really emphasize those flavor notes and really make them very punchy, which I personally really like, and it works better for some coffees than for others. I think this is a great cup, and I've consistently had good cups with it. I have had better cups with this with the V60, but it's also my personal preference to have more complexity, but I really enjoy both. So the pros and cons of this brewer. So for me, this brewer has a lot of pros. It's small, it heats up easily. As you saw in the brewing part, preheating went very quickly. It was super easy. You just pour a little bit of hot water around it and it will be hot. It will stay hot quite easily. If you compare it to like a Glass V60, which I also have, it takes a lot more water to preheat a Glass V60. And it will cool down a lot quicker. So I think in comparison, this has much better temperature management. It's very small because it doesn't have a base, so it's really only the brewer that you need to be able to store somewhere. I personally store it inside my MK dripper because it's just a little bit smaller than the MK dripper. The papers for it are easily available, the Kalita papers. I think one downside in terms of papers is that with an open bottom, it may be risky to use the Cypress papers. I haven't tried it. I do have them. I might do that in a future video. But in terms of other pros, I think the price is relatively good. It's 28 euros within the EU. If you compare that, for example, to the Type A brewer, which they also sell, which has a base, that already comes in at 56, so twice the price. It's cheaper than a Glass V60. I think in terms of glass brewers, it's one of the cheaper options, and I really like it. Another main point is versatility, right? So what I've mentioned it many times before in this video, you can grind really fine and go, you know, do these kind of recipes that I did today, which are more experimental, but you can also go with a much more classic V60 style recipe, like for example, the James Hoffman 1 cup recipe. So you do 5 pours, 50 grams. There's a lot of opportunities there to play around and to try different things, and it can create a lot of different styles of cups, which I personally really like. Additionally, the brewer is easy to clean. You can put it in a dishwasher, but I've noticed that rinsing it under the tap is sufficient because it has no ridges or any places coffee could get stuck, so it's very easy to clean. And it's a relatively forgiving brewer, I have to say, because in terms of like if you're a beginner, you may have a worse grinder, you know, producing more fines, or you may have a worse pouring technique, you know, so causing the fines to more easily clog up the filter. It's very hard to clog this brewer. Orea claims that it's impossible to clog it up. I have managed on some very fine grind settings with some very high fine producing like Ethiopian, Kenyan kind of beans, so it is possible. but it was mostly while I was experimenting and not really when brewing in the not really in the normal course of brewing. But I think it's something that's definitely a big pro of this brewer, is that as a beginner it's much more forgiving than something like a V60 where it's quite easy to stall and quite easy to kind of ruin your brew, which just doesn't happen as easily with this brewer. So what do I not like about this brewer? I think for me personally this is not really a problem, but I would say if you're a big household or you like to brew large cups of coffee, I don't think this is the brewer for you. It shines when it does 12 to 18 gram doses. I haven't really gone above anything above 20 grams. Maybe I should try it in a future video and see if it's capable of doing it, but I don't think it's really designed for it. The cone will hold about only, I would say about between 150 and 200 grams of water at a time. So if you're going up to those kinds of recipes, you probably have to do very coarse grinds and a lot of pours to kind of satisfy that recipe. I might try that in the future because I'm starting to get curious now just talking about it. Other downsides of this brewer is because it sits directly in a carafe, you have to really make sure it's level. It's not automatically leveled by the base, so you have to make sure that you level it. This also means that when you try to like do a swirl or something like that, you have to swirl the entire carafe rather than just the top part, as you saw me do in the brewing bit of the video. Another con I would say is if you don't have a carafe, it doesn't really brew into a cup because the brewer sits quite deep in the vessel that it brews into, because it doesn't have that base holding it up. So if you try to put it into a cup, I don't think there would be sufficient volume left in the cup to actually brew into it, which can be kind of annoying for the people that like to do that. Personally, I always like to brew into a carafe because it helps me cool down the coffee more quickly, and I have no patience. But I would say if you are looking for a small brewer, flat bottom, and you like to play around and experiment with your coffee, but also if you don't and you just like to brew the same thing every day, it's a very consistent brewer, and I still would recommend it. If you're the person who really likes high clarity, doesn't really care about body, already has a V60, I don't think there's much that you will gain from this. If you already have another flat bottom brewer, the gains might also be limited. I still think if I compare it, for example, to my MK dripper, this allows me to grind a lot finer and in that way experiment. But if that's not something you care about, then probably it's not worth getting. It also depends on your budget and the amount of brewers you already have. I have 4 different brewers. I probably will get more in the future. I really love playing with different brewers and experimenting, but if that's not your thing, personally, if I had to pick only one brewer for the rest of my life, I would still pick the V60. It would not be the Orea, but I think the Orea would be a close second. So would I recommend buying this brewer? It really depends on your situation. Okay, thanks for watching this video. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. If you could hit the like and subscribe, that would really help my channel. It's my first video, so I have no subscribers yet. If you have any comments or questions or things that you think I missed, or things that I think I should add or test, or that you just want to know about, reach out to me in the comments and I'll try to respond to everybody. Thanks so much for watching and have a beautiful day.